Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are viewing us from. We're so glad to have you join us again for Mavericks in Faith and Culture. We've got everybody here in our Hollywood Square. Uh, Lonnie, Neil, and Kevin. So, Kevin, will you open us up in a word of prayer and let's get going?
Yes. Father God, we thank you and we praise you for another opportunity to come humbly yet boldly before your throne to receive mercy and grace. We thank you for this day and everything in it. We thank you for this time together. We ask that you would bless this time, that people will begin to recognize the times that we're in as the sons of Issachar, that they begin to see and discern who you are and how to act and respond in this time and in this season. So, Father, we're here. We ask that you speak through us and that your people will receive revelation directly from you. So use us as vessels for the fulfillment of your glory. We just thank you and we praise you for it all. We give you praise in advance for it. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So we have, and I don't know if are you guys experiencing any delay with me? Or I'm trying to figure out overseas.
No,
Some with your
No?
audio.
Okay.
There, but
All right. So just figure it's coming from overseas and give me some grace here. All right. We're going to talk about gun violence. And more than just gun violence, we really want to address the issues going on with gun control laws and how we're able to work on that. So I'm imagining that Lonnie is doing some research, and so is Neil, because I can see you guys looking off camera at other things.
Looking at my notes.
And not everyone's
we gotta get our facts straight here.
trying to get their notes together because we want to.
We keep losing you there, Regina.
Definitely want to get this
Here we go.
conversation.
We keep losing you, Regina. I think your internet connection is really bad.
Yeah, it is this morning, and I'm trying to figure out how I can increase it. There's not much I can do right now. So, what were you saying? I missed what you were saying about facts. Say that again for me, Neil.
Oh, we got to get our facts straight if we're going to argue, right?
Oh, yes.
That
is the king of arguing and debating.
Well, the good thing now is that
So,
we have lots of tools. So
we have lots of what?
Tools to look up things.
Tools, got it. Okay. All right. It started because I was on looking through some news, and an article on ABC News caught my attention. And I think I shared it with you guys. But more than the article catching my attention, it was the fact that, you know how when you go to a news website, they have the main article and then they have this sidebar that has a bunch of other smaller articles or links to other articles. And what I noticed when I looked at the main article was that there were 3 or 4 articles on the side that had the same title about someone being shot, right? And so recently, a woman and her 3 children were found shot to death in a car in Utah. So this was from ABC News on September 4th at 7:26 p.m., coming out through the Associated Press. And even now, there is more news about shootings. So the thing that has always been a hot topic around gun control and Second Amendment rights is the idea that there is gun control advocates, let me just put it that way, want to see bans and restrictions on gun control because they're concerned about the mass killings. Right? I think there's always been gun control advocates, but when a lot of the more mass shootings, which seem to often happen in schools, elementary schools, college campuses, then we've seen some in malls and parks. But it's kind of once you hit the schools, that is a sore point, it hits everyone in their heart, right? There's no one who wants to see gun violence in that way of mass shootings happening, on school campuses. And we're still having them, right? So it's not like they've been abated. However, there are some things we need to talk about first. So what I want to do is let's just talk about Second Amendment rights first, and then we'll get into gun control policies, particularly the ones that Biden and Harris are pushing, because we're up for presidential elections in a few months. So, Second Amendment rights, Lonnie, what you got to say? And then we'll go to Neil, and then we'll go to Kevin.
Yes, because I know Neil's chomping at the bit here. I'll just say,
he is.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
yeah. Just say your name, Lonnie, and then pass to Neil.
Pass it to Neil.
Am I that transparent here?
I'll just say this to sum up, because we can get right to our brother Neil.
No, please. You guys should say as much as you can, because I'll just take up whatever slack is. So say as much as you want. In fact, Kevin should go after me, and then I'll just wrap
Okay. Well, I'm going to go for the whole.
Okay, we'll go.
The last bastion of protection that was set forth by the founding fathers in the documents that make this nation and what it is today is the protection against tyranny. And the protection against tyranny is the right to bear arms. Before they came to what became America, they were battling the elitists and those who owned all the land and had the armies and everything, and whatever they wanted to pass down to the peasants is what they did. So the founding fathers understood that, and I find it really ironic that here in this nation, folks don't understand that. I've got relatives that'll argue me down. They don't need, these rifles and these assault rifles, which there's no such thing as an assault rifle, for one thing. And we don't need all that. I says, it's done for your protection. I said, because when the government, with G-U-B-I, spell it, decides to be the oppressor, your last bastion of protection against government is the right to bear arms. And a perfect example of that was when you took into account the riots in Los Angeles. I was in Southern California when it took place after Rodney King. And the one place that those miscreants did not go up into what community was the Korean community who owned the small businesses. Why? Because those Koreans had experienced what the founding fathers experienced, and they were on their rooftops with rifles and pistols. And the first time they fired some rounds off, Pookie and Shanae and them and Manuel ran off to other parts of the community to wreak havoc, primarily in their own communities, because the communities had the right to bear arms and had arms, kept them from coming in there. I'll pass the mic to Brother Neil.
Well, no, actually, Kevin, do you want to go next?
Yeah, let Kevin go.
All right.
Yeah, let Kevin
All
go.
right. So what is fundamental about the Second Amendment is that these are also inalienable natural rights.
Yes.
We have a right to protect our person, We are sovereign individuals. We're innately endowed by God as a sovereign individual. That sovereign can and should protect itself. And so this is, we have a right to protect property. Guess what? The first property you have is yourself. All right. So this was actually played out during Reconstruction. After the Civil War, the KKK and the other racist haters were walking around, going to the various now freed men, black men, to their homes and basically intimidating, threatening, and attempting to re-enslave them.
Yes.
The only thing that kept those black men free is the Second Amendment and their firearms that they took from the battlefield. That was it. We would have had a completely different situation if they had given up their arms and said, okay, we fought in the war with y'all, but y'all going to keep because we believe in the government. No, they would have been re-enslaved, and we'd be talking about a whole different scenario for America right now.
Amen.
So the guns is what kept those men free. The guns is what keep us free. Believe it or not, to this very day. The reason why we don't have Venezuelan gangs all over America and completely inundating and overwhelming us everywhere is because, there's 380 some odd million firearms out there.
Yep.
And so they got to be careful where they release them. You have to understand they're releasing them. When I say them, the Venezuelan armed gangs, they are armed and they have no right to a firearm. None. Zero. Zilch. The Supreme Court 2 weeks ago said there is no way an illegal alien in America should be armed whatsoever. They have no right to it. But they're armed gangs. So as soon as you see a Venezuelan or any other illegal within a firearm, you should do a citizen's arrest. Use your firearm, take them, because they're not supposed to have any weapons whatsoever. They're not a citizen. They have no right to protection by a firearm, according to the Supreme Court. So here's the deal. If you recall, they the majority of them in New York and Chicago. There's 400 armed Venezuelan hardened gang members in New York, and there's hundreds additional in Chicago. These are both anti-Second Amendment areas, states, cities. And so they're able to now act as a militia against our brothers and sisters who just want to go to the store and grab some cigs, have a little drink, do a little something. They are now intimidated because these Venezuelan and these other folks from all over the world are here with firearms, ready to take control of these communities. They've already taken control in Aurora, Colorado, these apartment buildings and all of that. So again, these are all areas where there is zero tolerance for firearms. They cannot arm themselves because of the city that they live in. So we have seen this time and time again. Now, Detroit used to be, you haven't heard of Detroit as far as firearm deaths in probably a decade or more. The reason why is we had a guy, I think his name was Daniel Craig, I'm not sure, but he was a police chief in Detroit. And when he came on, he says, look, realistically, the Detroit police cannot get to you for probably 10 to 12 minutes. You will probably lose your life. So everybody in Detroit should go out, get trained, and get a license and carry firearms. Everybody in Detroit is armed. And guess what happened with the mass shootings, the robberies, and all that? That you can't get a come up if everybody got a gat on you. You try to creep up on them, they got something for you. So it's protection. It's a deterrent, and it makes sense. So this is why it's unequivocal. It's part of God's plan that we protect our sovereign property and territory, which is ourselves, by virtue of whatever we have available to us, whether it be an axe, a machete, a firearm, whatever it is. But we have a right to that. That's innate. It's inalienable. So only tyrannical governments want to take firearms away, and every time they do that, the people are victimized by government in horrible ways.
Amen.
On point.
So
Kevin, I just
good.
I want to dig in. Hold on, Neil. Just let me
No,
clarify
that's
a few things that Kevin said. I want to ask questions. So I'm sorry. Did you just say that in New York and Chicago and Aurora, Colorado, that there are gangs from illegal aliens in
Who
the
came across the
United
border
States
just
who are
recently, yes.
threatening U.S. citizens, and they're doing this particularly in cities where there has been a suppression of Second Amendment rights, where a majority of the people who live there believe that no one should have guns, so they shouldn't protect themselves, even though it's their constitutional right. And therefore, what they are seeing right now is that there are a group of people who are not even citizens who are controlling their neighborhoods with gun violence.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
And this is in
some
New
people say,
York.
well, yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry. Some people say that,
I
well,
was
how
saying,
did they get the guns? So here's how they got the guns in the Colorado Aurora area. They got their trucks and they did a smash. They took their trucks and smashed into these firearm dealer, these gun shops. And after they smash through the window and all the framing, they just jump out and they grab guns. And the owners of the shops these are after hours mostly, but even if they do it in broad daylight, everybody's so flummoxed they run away because they think, well, a truck coming through the and so they get out and they literally empty the store of firearms. They also bring some of them across the border, but most of those go to the cartel. It's probably not a lot of those in our streets. But the reality is once they get here, they have several $1,000s a month stipend that they get, and they already have room and board and food paid. So they have nothing to do. They'll go and just buy some off the street. And so they are armed. They're armed and very, very dangerous. They're mean business.
and this is happening not in some foreign country, but in the United States. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that people listening are understanding that go ahead and deny your Second Amendment rights to protect yourself and your property. And if you want to see an example of that, there are some examples, not in countries, but right here in the United States in some of our very cities.
Yep.
Neil, go ahead.
And you have to understand how those Venezuelans got into the country. They got in the country under the border czar Kamala Harris.
Yep.
Right? You have to understand that they've not been here for years and years. This is a more recent thing. Those gangs specifically are much more recent. So
Yep.
we have to understand what's going on here. So here's what I want to both of the gentlemen before me precisely covered the points I was going to cover, but so let me add a bit more filler into it. The Second Amendment was not written so you could go hunting. The Second Amendment, in a sense, was not even written for you so you could defend yourself from bad people, because we already have that, as Kevin said, that's an inalienable right. It comes from God. The Second Amendment was written specifically because in Boston, during the War of Independence, just before the War of Independence, the British came and shut down the armory in Boston to make sure that none of the patriots were able to get their guns. They confiscated all the guns, and the patriots said, whoa, wait a minute, buddy. This is a bad idea. One, that all our guns is in one armory, and two, that you think you can shut it down. So, of course, they didn't put up with that. They stormed the armory, with a few hundred of them, and I think there were 5 or 6 redcoats or whatever under the governor's orders or whatever. They took the guns back and they said, we're never going to let this happen again. So that, number one, the Second Amendment was not written to stop you from being shot at by a criminal. It was to stop you from being shot at by the government.
Government.
The Second Amendment was written to stop you from evil government overthrow. Now, yes, it also has a very much application for evil gangs, Venezuelan gangs, and all that. So somebody once asked me, she said, so you think there should be no limits on guns? What about if I can get myself a bazooka? And the answer to that is, if the person I'm fighting against has a bazooka, I need to have a bazooka. If the person I'm fighting against has a machine gun, I have a machine gun. The person I'm fighting against has a knife, I need to have a gun, because I never bring a knife to a gunfight. I always bring a gun to a knife fight, okay? So let's be very clear about that. I want a bigger gun than what they're going to have. Why? Because that is how we protect ourselves. So number one. Number two, if there was an evil government and they wanted to take over America, or they wanted to take over a group of people, what's the first thing you do? You disarm them. If you go back to the Israelites and the Philistines had technology, had metal technology, they had iron technology. The Israelites only had bronze technology. What's the first thing the Philistines did? They made it so that no metal technology got over to the Israelites. Why? Because you would take your bronze sword and you'd fight their metal sword, and your bronze sword would go dull, and immediately you're at a loss. So why? The first thing you do is you disarm the opponent using technology, or disarm them with arms, right? So that's the first thing that happens. You know, I have a Facebook page called Stop Gun Violence. And the first thing on there, it says, it's a group of Apache Indians holding guns. And the caption is, give us your guns, we will take care of you. We know what happened to them, right? So the whole idea is, you can't trust the government. The government is meant to make created of evil people. So you can't give up your guns for them. So now the question is, well, what about the people being killed? Let me ask you this. Would you rather, as bad as it is when people get killed, and the solution for that, let me answer that. As bad as it is for people to get killed, would you rather an entire civilization get destroyed just so you could save 5 or 6 people from being killed in a moment? Which is more important? And the second thing you have to understand is, and I have this caption on that page, I say, don't worry, when death is only 3 seconds away, government soldiers and the police are only half an hour away.
Right.
You know what? You think they're really, somebody breaks into your house with a gun and you're like, oh yeah. Now their intent is to kill you. Their intent is not to steal from you. Their intent is to steal from you and kill you. First kill you and then rape your wives and daughters and then steal from you, right? It's very serious. Evil people exist. So what do? You have to have stronger. The solution, as we all know, solution for a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a bigger gun. Right? So in those mall shootings, the solution for that is always somebody with a bigger gun. Yes, people will die, people will suffer, but people are going to die and suffer anyway. The question is, how are you going to limit that suffering and death? And you limit that with the good guys with the gun. And trust me, the government isn't always a good guy.
Right.
So I did a little bit of research, right? And it was interesting to find out that a majority of the mass shootings do not happen with AR-15s, right? Because one of the big concerns has been, and even in Biden's policy, which we'll look at in a moment, was we want to ban AR-15s. And it's sort of like, why? Because only 3% of the mass shootings that happen with an AR-15. Many of them are with handguns, shotguns, and pistols. So I was kind of surprised because there's this, conversation piece or things that are put out that somehow the AR-15 is the cause of all mass shootings.
And you know why that is, by the way?
Which they are not.
You know why that is? It's because you can't walk into a mall conveniently with a gun, with a rifle. It's harder to walk in. You've got to walk in with a handgun or something. If you do walk in with a rifle, the minute you pull it out, a lot of people can see, right? Whereas a handgun, you might be actually pull it off. You might get a few shots without it. Now, what's interesting about that is if you don't see mass shootings in the area where they have open carry.
Right.
Think about a perp. He walks in there with an AR-15. Everybody else has AR-15. The minute he lifts it up to fire, he knows he's going to go down. right? Because you don't have to go if everybody's open carrying, they've got stuff around their shoulders or in their pockets or stuff. They don't have to go far. They don't have to reach into their backpack. They have to, they can. So they do happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm just saying it happens a lot less in public areas when there's open carry. And the other thing I should also notice that in countries where they have limited guns, the killings are with knives.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like Europe.
I mean, look at Britain. Britain tried to outlaw knives that were longer than 14 inches. Literally, the government saying, who needs a knife longer than 14 inches?
Oh.
So when people want to kill, people are going to find a way.
They're going to find a way.
Yeah, when people want to hurt people, they're going to find a way. And so
absolutely.
I thought that was interesting that.
Go ahead. No.
I was just saying, I thought it was interesting that only 3% of all the mass shootings that happen are using AR-15s.
Right.
The other fact that when I was doing some studying, I think you guys saw the article from Heritage Foundation, right?
Biden's
and yeah, one of the
not
interesting
old,
facts
though, right?
that
is that a few years old or was that current?
I don't know. I don't think it's a few years old. Let me see.
Okay. I just couldn't find
but
it recently, but it could be. I mean,
yeah. The thing that I wanted us to it is old. It is a few years old. But the facts of the discussion were still very relevant. Is when, the other conversation piece that people say is, well, when the Second Amendment was written, no one had AR-15s, right?
Oh yeah, I want to answer that one.
And so the thing what she brought out was a very good point, is that when the Second Amendment was written, the type of weapons that people had were the weapons that were used in war, right? So when they had a musket and they had those rifles, those were the things that was the assault weapon of their time, if you will. Yep. Those were the powerful guns, the most used, the most popular held guns at the time. So it's not as if the amendment was put in there in a vacuum, right? Because it was still given to people and written in such a way that even the people of that day were holding and keeping in their homes the same weapons that were used to fight the wars, right? And so it wasn't about the type of weapon, right? It was that you were able to procure and hold on to one to protect your property. Neil, you said you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. So also it is a misunderstanding that while the musket was the most common, the most powerful guns at that time were the Gatling guns and the pickle guns. The pickle guns could shoot, I don't know, it was hundreds of rounds per second, because it was basically a crank, and you do this, right? And you crank, and it would just shoot it would shoot bullets. The longest time was reloading all of those the belt things. So those guns were very common. I mean, not very common, were very available, and was in the arms of different armies. And yet the founding fathers knew about those guns, and they didn't say, well, all except the pickle gun, right? They didn't say that, right? All except the cannon, right? They had cannons. I mean, they had huge, massive cannons, right? They didn't say, well, you can't own a cannon, right? Now, of course, we think, well, of course, you can't own a cannon. But hey, as I said, if my enemy has a cannon, I need to have a cannon, right? And this is the issue. This is the issue here. Now, I just want to add one more thing, because I have been asked. They said, so you think you're going to attack the government with an AR-15 if the bad government agents come to you? I said, absolutely. They said, well, how? Are they going to come at you with a gun? I mean, with a tank or a plane or armored personnel carrier? I said,
drone?
Well, don't you understand? Or drone. Well, now it's a drone, right? I said, don't you understand that with a gun, I can capture a tank or a plane or armored personnel carrier, which is what we did with our guns when we captured the massive cannons from the British. Right here we are in the Revolutionary War. We've got these we've got these muskets and all that, and they've got all these weapons of war because they're the professionals. And we capture all those weapons. And we remember there's this whole story of how they sent this, how who was it? It was Washington, but he was working with somebody, and he sends them out to get these big British guns that the British had lost when we destroyed them and fought them, and he brings them all the way back to the battle. I think it was in Boston too. So there's a whole story about that during the Revolutionary War. Well, of course, so we can capture those. In fact, and with guns and tanks, we can capture Air Force bases, and with Air Force bases, we can capture ships. It goes all down the line. I mean, it's don't sell yourself short on what we can do with determined, experienced people.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the other thing,
Good.
yeah. And the other thing I want to add, and this is very interesting, is if you count the number of guns that Americans have, the number of guns we have is more than all the guns of all the militaries of all the world, including ours.
Wow.
The amount of guns that private individuals own in America is more than the number of guns of all the militaries of the world, including the American military.
Wow.
Which is why Japan did not
Okay.
march into America during World War II.
Right.
And we need to keep it that way.
Yep.
That's quite good. That's quite good. There are we do have a lot of.
Let me close out. Let me close out. If we're done with the topic, let me close out with one more important point. Let's say you determine you're going to take the guns away from normal citizens. How are you going to do that? Because the normal citizens, the American patriots, are not going to give you the gun. So are you going to take guns and come in and shoot American citizens to take away their guns? You want to talk about mass murder? Oh, we want to prevent a few people from killing people in the mall. So we're going to go in and kill 100 million Americans and take their guns away from them. What is the purpose of taking the guns away? To stop people from shooting each other in the mall? No, I'll tell you what the purpose of taking guns away from Americans are. It's so that you can take over America. And let me tell you that if you're an American, you better be afraid of that, because that's what they want to do. And no, we will never give our guns up.
That's right.
Ooh, that brother's
So-
preaching.
I know. So we're not done with this topic, by the way, because we haven't even gotten to the policies piece. But the thing about saving lives, right? I was also thinking about it when I was like, well, you know what? How many people die in drunk driving accidents? More people die in drunk driving accidents than all the mass shootings. Every year, at least 10,000 people are dying in drunk driving accidents. 10,000. I did a search on it. 95,000 are dying by alcohol-related incidents. So you've got your boat incidents, you've got, you're drunk and you misfire, or all sorts of things, right? But 95,000 alcohol-related deaths, over drinking, alcohol intoxication, but 10,000 at least drunk drivers. But nowhere that we are going to penalize you for buying Heinekens, or all the red wine drinkers should have background checks. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there are so many other places to put our energies that could reduce death, that do not violate your Constitution rights. In your Constitution, there's no right that you can have a shot of whiskey, or drink until you fall down. Those are constitutional rights. So we wanted to deaths, unnecessary deaths in our country. Why don't we look at alcohol? and why don't we make sure that everybody has to put a breathalyzer test on their vehicle. That's going to be a requirement now. If we did those type of things, we could reduce deaths immensely, violating constitutional rights. Right. So there are other places to look at if we're concerned about that. If it's really about protecting life, but there's always some other underlying type of it. No one wants to have that conversation about let's go back to the days when we banned alcohol, and really, how well did that work? When we had those.
And I can tell you why they won't go after that is because taxation comes from alcohol. There's money that government gets every time alcohol is sold. So they don't want to touch that sacred cow, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a big business in alcohol. Not that I'm recommending it. I'm just saying there's a lot of money behind it.
Right.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
People would argue there's a lot of money behind guns and arms, but apparently not as much as the alcohol industry.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's get to background checks. One of the other things that's in the policies, right? So in the policies, they talked about banning the AR-15s, which, as we mentioned before, if you're just joining us, the AR-15s are only 3% of mass shootings. AR-15s are not used, when you talk about domestic violence and even, the smaller stores being hand robbed, like the mom and pop stores, things like that. People aren't really going in with AR-15s. They're going in with handguns and pistols, right? So banning the AR-15 is not going to significantly reduce any kind of illegal crime. But what you could do is, as we said, make law-abiding citizens now become, federal inmates, if you will, right? Because how many law-abiding citizens own AR-15s? And they're definitely not going to give them up to you.
No.
So we talked about banning the AR-15s. Another policy thing was background checks. Right?
So let's talk about background checks. There is a danger of background checks. I mean, you want to go ahead and finish your thought? I didn't want to jump in, but.
You already jumped in, Neil. Go right ahead. You can't help yourself. Go ahead.
So there's a great danger in background checks. One of the things that Hitler did is they had not only background checks, but they had gun registration in Germany. From what I understand, and I have to look this up to verify it. So what they did is when they decided that they were going to take over the nation, they went through the registry, found out everybody owned guns, and then they could go and collect those guns from them. And if those guys refuse to give those up, then they just kill them, right? So it becomes very easy. So there's a danger in the government. If you are having the guns, remember the Second Amendment, not to protect you from criminals specifically, but to protect you from bad government. If the government knows who has the guns, you've kind of defeated your purpose altogether, right? The whole purpose of the Second Amendment is to make sure that you can fight a bad government. Well, if the government says, well, Joe has a gun, Neil has a gun, Kevin has a gun, Lonnie has a gun, Regina has a gun, well, we'll just go to their house and pick them up. And once we get to their house, we'll isolate them, get their guns, and then they won't have guns. Well, then what's the purpose of having a Second Amendment? Right. So the danger is, but we totally understand that there's a danger if you don't have background checks, homicidal maniac, gun, gangs and crazy people may get guns. We understand that there's a limit there, and this is why there can be a background check, but it has to be instantaneous, and all they're doing is they're checking your background before I sell the gun, but I cannot tell anyone whether you bought the gun or not, just that we had a background check, and I should not. Ideally, you don't register a gun, you don't do any of that. You go, well, if we don't register a gun, then how do I know if a gun is used for a crime? There's so many other ways to check if a gun is used for a crime. We won't go into that right now. But the danger is if you can track the fact that I bought a gun just because I did a background check, well, that's the same as having a registration, right? So you should have background checks, and you should have random background checks. and you shouldn't be able to register whether the guy actually bought a gun or not. There's so many ways to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that the idea of having the background checks is somehow what people feel are going to resolve the mental health issues of the users. Right? So, I mean, when we look at the shootings that happen publicly, especially the mass shootings, right? Or in the cases of domestic violence, the thing is, they're like, well, we should have done a background check. But a background check does not dictate the mental health capacity of an individual going forward. We'd be better off putting in services and investing that time in helping communities deal with mental health, right?
Yeah.
Because that, like, I'm not a happy worker, and my family's doing well, my kids are in school, everything's going well, and I just pick up a gun and just start shooting people, right? First of all, if I want to kill somebody, I'm going to kill somebody, no
Right.
matter if it's a gun, a machete, a knife, if I poison them, if I hit them with my car, whatever. If I hire somebody else with a gun, right? The real thing that we're looking at, especially, is what is about the mental health of the individuals who go and do the mass shootings.
Yeah.
Why is there not a better a better process in helping those with mental health? Why is it not that we don't have, when we think about our vets who are returning, those who have PTSDs, who are committing suicide? How many gun deaths happen by suicide are gun deaths, gun death related. So if we want to reduce, the gun suicide is probably the highest one, right? With guns, then we have domestic violence. Those are clearly mental health issues. We could address that issue instead of looking at the gun issue, right? The same thing with people who consistently are drinking and have alcohol problem. Banning alcohol is not the result, is not going to solve the problem. We need to deal with the mental health issue and family structures. The other thing to consider is that, okay, let's talk about gun violence in a community. Why don't we have better work programs? Why don't we have better social structure programs? Why aren't we working on keeping fathers in the home and families more structured together so that gangs don't become the opportunity for young people to feel that this is their only way to make it out? This is my only way to feel connected. It still then comes down to social structures, right?
Yeah.
And so some of the violence that they think that guns are going to stop is still an issue. So you guys know I'm in Kenya. We still have, poverty. They still have gangs. They still have disrupted families. No one's allowed to have guns here. Like, the people are not allowed to have guns here unless you go through certain registration, and usually you have to be making so much money, right? Because they figure if you have a lot of money and have a lot of property, then you need to protect it. But the average person, right, cannot get a gun license in Kenya. But there's still husbands killing their wives. They just douse them with petrol and set them on fire. They kill them with machetes and knives. Right? The murder is still happening here, and the people aren't allowed to have guns. So it's human nature. It's the sinful nature of us as an individual. Taking the gun away is not going to reduce the deaths, right? We are human people. We will find a way to kill if we want to kill. And so,
well, I mean, that's also reflecting
Go
the fact that the cities that have the most gun control have no shortage of gun shootings.
Chicago.
Right? I mean, if gun control was really working, why is Detroit, now Detroit not so much, but Chicago and New York, why they're shootings, so high. I mean, why is the gun control not working? I mean, surely you'd see something. Why is it that Republican states have less mass murderers and shootings and violence than Democrat states? I mean, I'm not talking about, I shouldn't say states, I should say cities. Republican cities have much less than Democrat cities, right? There's obviously something happening in these Republican type establishments that is helping reduce the gun violence. What is that? Well, it's certainly not banning of guns. And so the real question is, if you really care about lives, you have to look for the most effective solution. It's not enough for us to say, well, I'm going to do something that sounds good. It makes me feel good because I did something. But in reality, you're just allowing lots of people to die. How heartless can you be to not look for the actual solution?
Right.
Exactly.
I think it can be hard too for people listening and who will listen later on to think that somehow your government might come for you. Right?
Oh, it's never happened before.
Okay, Neil.
Germany, Russia, China, Cuba. Oh, wow.
Okay. But no, let's help those naive people, right? People who are really thinking that this is America. There's no way that my government is going to turn on me. So let's go back to COVID, shall we?
Yeah.
How did our government handle that situation?
Exactly.
Right? How did they begin to and so first I want to say that for all the people who lost loved ones, friends, co-workers due to COVID, we are sorry for your loss, right? We're not belittling the death of people. We're not. That's not what we're talking about here right now, right? So hear us. We are very sorry that you lost people during COVID-19. But for those who are now thinking that my government would never try to control me, that my government would never try to put limits on what I can and cannot do, please go back and think about COVID-19, right? How our government handled that situation. Did they handle it better than some other states, other countries? That's not what we're talking about. We want to talk about, did they limit rights? Did they impede upon what it was that you could and could not do? Did we find companies saying, if you don't get the shot, you can't work here anymore?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So if they did that in the 21st century, tell me what makes you think that that is a huge jump for them to come after you in some other type of situation. Do you know what I mean? I almost felt like that was like a testing ground, to see how much could and would the American people allow us to curtail their rights and their freedoms. Because whether you believe that COVID was manufactured, it came from a monkey, from China, whatever, the point is it was here in the US. You were not immune from it. It was here in the United States, and our governments went into action and said, because of this extenuating circumstances that has happened, we are now going to make some rules that violate your rights. And people were saying, well, it's for the protection of other people. But there are people who abided by everything and still died.
Yeah.
Right? Who got the shot and still died.
That's right.
Wore their masks and still died. So don't think it's strange, right, that it's possible for them to say, for the protection of the broader community, we need you to turn your guns in.
That's right.
Because you can trust us that we're going to take care of you. It's not a big stretch for those who are naive and think that your government would not try to control you. Please understand I am not a conspiracy theorist, and nothing wrong with them, but just think, right? What would happen? And you don't even have to go that far, because when you look at the Biden-Harris administration, who has let all of these illegal aliens into our communities and are giving them social service and welfare benefits, and they're not citizens. Please tell me how you think your government will not put your needs to the background, and you're a citizen that's been living. Right. So, I've been speaking a lot.
Well, I also,
Kevin, Lonnie, have some things you want to add? Neil.
Well, I'll let them go. I'll let them go, because
Neil just does not want to give up the mic. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, have we forgotten about
Kevin,
the
any
lynching?
thoughts you
I
want
mean,
to
we just talked about the lynching, right?
He said, I thought you said
The
Neil.
US What?
Go
Did
ahead.
I miss something?
It's the delay that's messing up.
Oh, it's me. Yeah. So I started talking.
Let's let Lonnie go. Lonnie.
Just
Yeah,
delay.
go ahead, Lonnie, and then I'll jump in.
I was just going to say, ditto to everything you're saying, Regina. All we have to do is look at those who had parents that were of age and were in older facilities in New York, and the children were not allowed to come see the parents. And they locked the parents away in those facilities, and made them get on those oxygen machines and so forth. And many of them died. And there was little that the folks could do, short of going into the hospitals and the facilities with guns and taking their parents out of the facilities. There's evidence everywhere of it taking place. Historically, like my dear old dad says, America's a great nation, but it has warts. There's times where we've missed it. When we miss it big time is we let those with a specific agenda get into power and look to drive some type of agenda. One of which is, if you think about slavery and how it came to fold, not everybody in America was pro-slavery, but enough folks were put in positions of leadership that they could drive that as a platform. And those who had the darker paint job got the short end of the stick. So those of us with common sense don't have much trust in our government. And we think of the founding fathers, they would even say, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, I'll probably paraphrase his quote that talked about that, we were a republic if we can keep it. But there's always those with a nefarious agenda, because it is a battle between good and evil. And so when evil becomes prevalent and begins to take over, it's using Kevin's quote, steal, kill, and destroy. It's that's their objective, period. They don't gravitate from that. Steal, kill, and destroy.
Yeah,
but I'm amazed that relatives, some of my relatives I've talked to are way more trusting of our government than they need to be. And if you've got the darker paint, I would think that you would just go, don't you remember the Tuskegee experiments?
Yep.
That's not that long ago.
That's right. So here's my take on I'm trying to put some caps on the gun issue. What's especially nefarious, if you look at the patterns of our government that's supposedly here to help, you look at, after every mass shooting, they want to confiscate guns from law-abiding citizens. But if you look at the people who have done the mass shootings, first, the majority of them are trans and homosexuals, right? They're on some kind of drug cocktail. I'm talking about the last 5-6 mass shootings over the past 8-10 years. They're younger people who are sort of experiencing this trans dysphoria or homosexual dysphoria, and they're, by and large, they're on some kind of cocktail, some kind of heavy hormonal or some other cocktail. These cocktails give them, the side effects is suicidal thoughts and aggressive thoughts. And this is a pattern. So for our government to come to us after they precipitated providing the drugs to these young kids, didn't know any better, they took the drugs, and then basically ascribing that all of us are nut jobs and we all need to have our guns confiscated. That's what they're saying. They're trying to draw some kind of equivalency. And this is especially appalling. And I'm surprised that we as American citizens will say, how dare you? I'm not a nut job. I'm not on a hormonal treatment. I'm not on psychotic drugs. How dare you? I didn't do any mass shooting. Why would you come to me and say, oh, I need your gun? What? Okay, take me out of that equation. First, you start with everybody that you're giving these psychotic drug cocktails to that are in the trans movement, these hormones. You make sure you monitor them and you make sure they don't get a gun from their parents or anybody else. Make sure, because they're the ones that are most susceptible to these voices and these episodes. You start with them. You don't come to us law-abiding citizens, never had a problem. Talk about, oh, I need you. What? So that shows you that there's a nefarious government thing that they want to use to try to enforce taking away our Second Amendment rights. But they're empowering those confused kids mostly, and to go out and do the shooting. They want to take the law-abiding citizens' weaponry away.
Great.
Right. Very good. Neil, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add a few things. I mean, if you think about what the U.S. government has done, when the lynchings were happening in the southern states, this is after 1877, when the Republicans withdrew from the southern states of the Compromise of 1877, which I talk about in my new book, by the way, thanks to our buddy Walter Hoy, who gave me a whole rundown on it and did a great article on it. It was the government that was attacking the blacks, right? And as you mentioned, the people who actually organized them were actually the Republican clubs were organizing them with guns and making sure they had guns to protect themselves, because the Republican clubs themselves could not. Before that, the Union soldiers were guarding them. Okay, so number one, we see the government is not helping there. Two, how about the Sand Creek massacre of the Cheyenne in Colorado? Well, there's the government coming to protect the Native Americans, right? This is after we have treaties. What about all the local indigenous Japanese during the Second World War? They're taken off and carted off to camps, right? Well, aren't they U.S. citizens? Yes, they are. You want to see the government taking them? And then, of course, then there was the Wilmington, North Carolina coup, where the white supremacists threw out the black government in Wilmington, or the governor or the mayor who was pro-black. I don't think he was black himself, but they came in and they, with guns, armed guns, they went in and they took out the established government and they became the government, okay? And then, of course, we should never forget the Banana Republic Wars. Why are they called Banana Republics? Because Teddy Roosevelt and a bunch of other presidents sent Marines into these South American companies. Why? Because the Dole Fruit Company, back then they were called the U.S. something else, the Dole Fruit Company wanted... They had the local islands and local republics, the local nations had elected new governors and new presidents who didn't want to do business with the Dole Fruit Company. And so guess what? Americans sent in the Marines to take back, and that's why they're called the Banana Republics, because then we would put our own dictator in charge, and that's where we get that term. So you think American government is noble? You think they're never going to be nefarious? We already talked about the Tuskegee experiment. So where can you even say that we should trust the government? There is no line. There is no common, decent understanding between you and history if you can say we should always trust the government. You should never trust the government. And Washington, Jefferson, and Madison knew that. And they said as much. Madison says if men were angels, we would need no government. But if government were angels, as I had my preface of that, you would need no elections, nor would you need guns.
Good. That's good. let's understand that government is not some invisible,
Magical.
thing. It is made up of fallible human beings,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Go to your DMV. That's government, right? It's not. Government is made up of people.
Yeah.
As
Let me
much
add one more
as
thing,
we.
because you reminded me of one more thing. And I was reading a book, and the
You know
book
what? I'm going to
said,
have a jar. I'm going to put a jar here. And every time Neil interrupts, you've got to drop a $20 bill. Go ahead, Neil.
the thing is, though, by the time you finish talking, I think you're done, but you're actually on the next sentence because of the delay. So I'm not I'm interrupting you. For you, I'm interrupting you in the middle of your talk. But anyway, so here's an important thing. We believe there is an evil one. We believe there is a demonic, there's a demon, there's a Satan, there's an evil person. The evil one wants to hurt all of God's creations. God's most favorite creation is humans, right?
Yes.
The apple of his eyes, the love of his universe. The creation of the universe was the love of his eye, and that was the human being. So how can Satan hurt God the most? By destroying human beings, by destroying lives, by making themselves worthless. You can't, as a single individual crazy person, you can go out and kill people. And you need to stop them with a gun. But to be the most effective killer of human beings, you need to be government. And so Satan's desire is for government. And that's why we see government killing the most people. We see Hitler killed 13 million, but he was nothing compared to Stalin, who killed 40 million, who was nothing compared to Mao, who killed 80 million. And all those are nothing compared to the abortion industry that would have killed 66 million in America and probably 100 million across the world. So
$1 billion across the world.
$1 billion across the world. So if you want to kill people, be government. And that's where we have to watch out.
Very good. And now, so I just want to frame our conversations in that as we've been talking about Second Amendment rights, when we're talking about gun policy, we've really brought up some points that it is not the gun, right? It is the individual with the gun that is the problem. And so removing that or setting laws that affect, as Kevin was effectively saying, because someone who is mentally unstable went and shot up a school, you want to then go to all the law-abiding citizens and punish them for the actions of those that have mental health issues, those that have anger issues. Again, very sorry for domestic violence and things that happen at home where family members, usually husbands, come in and after being angry, kill, right? Or those who are in gangs in the streets, background checks is not going to stop them from getting a gun, right? What we need to do is give them jobs, change our welfare structure, keep parents together in the homes, educate. Let's fix the education system, right? Because that's where everything comes up. Right? Educate teachers probably see the students with some real mental health issues who could intervene at a time when that might deter them from becoming the mass shooter. Right. And so there are so many other places to direct the work and the efforts and the policies. If we improved our public school systems, I bet you we would see a significant decline in some of the gun violence that's happening everywhere because teachers would recognize things, kids would be educated, they would be given and have the opportunity to work and have jobs and create jobs that would not have them turning to the streets. Many people, domestic violence happens over money, drugs, and alcohol. If we're going to do that, as we brought out earlier, 10,000 people about die a year in drunk driving accidents, right? Let's close up all the bars. That's still not going to solve the problem.
Ban cars.
So there are many other ways that we could look at the policy, but taking away our protection that we have under our Constitution, because once they come for one constitutional piece, they're going to come for the rest.
They'll never
Right.
stop.
Once they come for one constitutional piece, just know that they are going to the rest of the Constitution. All right. So we want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We went over our hour, but it was really good conversation. We thank everyone. Please share this, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks. So we hope to see you then. Everyone have a very blessed night from all of us at Mavericks in